we're starting again. So the width and length of the spine is what we would want for this first lining. So we're gonna measure off of the book. Our height first. The grain ideally should be going with the spine, so grain long. And then the width of the spine, you can hold the paper right up to the spine and transfer the mark. And make out 2 more marks to get a consistent width. Okay. And trim at the height. And this piece is ready to go. The glue seems like it's drying pretty well. And I'm just gonna take these books off. After it has, oh yeah. So at this point, if I don't know how good this camera is, but there are little gaps in between the sections that don't have glue. They look kind of shadowy, and that means we need to do another layer of glue. It's very common to need to do a couple of layers. Usually 2 layers of glue is what is recommended. Just adding some more. And let that dry. We can also cut the Japanese flange down, which is, the measurement is the distance from the kettle stitch to kettle stitch, so the first and last sewing stations. And then the width is the width of the spine plus 2 inches. So there's an inch on either side of the spine. So take the measurement kettle stitch to kettle stitch. And then 2 inches plus, I'm guessing this is about, it's ½ an inch, so 2.5 inches wide. Okay. Turn that square. This layer will go on after the first Japanese lining. So this is not fully dry, but I think I'm gonna move forward just to get this going. And the way, well, before actually we apply this first lining, Japanese lining, we need to miter just a little bit of the corners, just in case they become visible. We want to nip just a millimeter by a millimeter triangle off of the corner. It's hard, gosh, it's hardly anything at all, but it really does help. Okay. Next step. Hopefully you would give this another 5 or 10 minutes or so to dry up. I'm going to keep moving and take the boards and place them just maybe 2 millimeters away down from the spine so that we're not gluing linings to the board. Just want to reveal the spine a little bit. Okay, and next, usually, so when we're in the bindery, we have some equipment, tools to clamp this text block in place and have it face up so that we can work and have it clamped. But at home, we don't have these things, and that's okay. I think I'd recommend putting the text block between books this time. So I have one book here, which will raise it up from the table so we can access the spine a little easier. And then place a couple of books on top to keep the pressure down. And now we can attach our linings pretty easily. And with this first one, we'll glue it out with our mix or Elmer's glue. Thin layer here. And next, carefully line it up with the spine. And press down nice and hard with your finger. Once you've got it down, you can bone fold it gently because we don't want to tear the paper, but you can definitely go over it with the bone folder. And let this dry for 5 or 10 minutes. When you're doing an addition of books, multiples, case binding is really nice because you can do one step on one book and the same step on the next book, and the same, and by the time you get back to the first one, it's dry and ready to go. So making like additions of these is really nice, satisfying too. Are there any questions thus far on these steps? Cool. Cool. So, have our next sheet of paper, the Japanese flange. And this is going to go in the middle of the text block, positioned just like this, so that it has flaps on both sides of the spine. And maybe what I'll do is lightly fold it in half so that I know to line it up in the middle of the spine, both sides. Like that. So the way to attach it is to add more glue to the spine between the kettle stations, like that. Just apply a thin glue right on top of the paper already there. And the reason being to not glue the paper is that it's larger than the spine, so it would be difficult to glue exactly the shape that we need. A little bit. Okay. Place this in the middle. Smooth it out with your finger first, and then the bone folder again. Okay. Next up is, let's see, the Western lining, which is not going to be, if you had Japanese paper available, it would not be with Japanese paper. It would be with a Western, like a text weight paper. Computer paper, again, works just fine. But this last lining kind of holds everything together, especially if you're adding end bands, which I did not put in the instructions, but could be nice to go over if you all want to learn how to put those little tiny rounded pieces that I'm sure you've seen on older, maybe fancier books. We can actually make those with general materials, paper or cloth. And I have a scrap of that marble paper. I think I'll use this for the end band. And then we also need some kind of cord to go inside the end band. So actually, let's just see if I have some of that. I have some thicker cotton thread that's going to work. It's a little bit on the thin side. Most end bands are a little bit thicker than this, but it's okay. It'll work. And if you have something like cotton yarn, like a dense cotton yarn, that would work really well. Or twine or like string used with cooking, that thicker stuff works really nicely for end bands. But anything that you've got, I would say definitely thicker than sewing thread for a sewing machine. That's very, very thin. But something to give us some bulk, and just need a few inches. And then some kind of material that either goes with your color schemes or adds contrast. This will be just a little bit visible at the top of the text block. And ideally, the grain should be going along with the thread or whatever material you're using for the inside. You can use scissors for this. Just want about 1 inch wide by a few inches long. And our next step is to glue the thread to the inside of the end band, like this. I can show you how that works. So we'll lay the thread about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch from one edge of the paper and glue out that space about a 1/4 inch away. And then lay the thread along that line that you just glued and fold over the paper. Making sure that the thread is pushed as far back into the fold as possible to make a nice, defined, rounded shape. Use the bone folder to define that space on both sides. So a little bit, this spot right here is not totally tight, so I'm not gonna probably end up using that for the end band, but the end bands only need to be the width of the spine. So this area looks good and that area looks good. So I'll use those areas. But when you make yours, let that dry as well before using it. I'm just gonna go for it and cut it down, but when it's wet, it'll definitely lose its shape as you cut it with scissors or an X-Acto knife. So just let it dry for a few minutes before using it. Check on, nice, our spine looks good with our text block. And the next step is to get that spine measurement again so that we can transfer it onto the end band material. So just taking that spine measurement. And then start with a square edge. So just trim off a little bit to make it square. And then trim down the width of the spine. And 2 of them, so you have one at the head and one at the tail. And then the length here can be trimmed to about 1/2 inch. So you can eyeball that. 1/2 inch long, both. And at this point, we can pull this out. And the end bands are going to be adhered at the very top of the book, like this, so that when you look at the text block, you'll see just a little pop of color at the top there. That's what the end band is for. So you can apply glue. Not sure that it matters. Maybe I'll glue out the end band material. Glue it out on the back side from just below the little bump down to the end of the paper. And then to put it on, place the bump just over the top of the text block. Let me see this. That. And then use a bone folder after pressing it down to really get it well adhered. I might recommend, if you're doing this, to like maybe hold it in between your legs or something, or if you have a friend or family member around, if they can hold it for you while you work, that would be helpful. Or just hold it in your hand like this. Okay, it's pretty well in place and looks like that. And on the back side. Then just do the same thing on the tail or head, or whichever order that you did it in. Folder. And there we go. Both have end bands, head and tail. And our last lining now is the Western lining, which since I've been using a thin paper, I'm just going to keep using that one more time for our last lining. With your book as well, you can take it out of the boards once all the layers are dry and kind of feel for how much restraint that it has. And if that's enough, you can skip the Western lining. It can be nice to add one more layer over top of the end bands to keep everything secure. But this one is optional. Take the width of my spine and cut down to the width of the spine and the total length from the middle of the end band, so it has some support, to the middle of the end band. So it might be just a little bit longer than the height I'm getting so far. Measure it by placing the paper here. Okay. And once again, making those little tiny miter cuts. Pull out the paper. And carefully place it on the spine. Turn it in between the books here. And give one final bone fold. And careful. That's 3. One tip that my professors have given me is if your bone folder isn't sliding very nicely across the spine, take your bone folder and kind of rub it in your hair like this, on your face where there's oil, and that natural oil will help it just glide right across. Just like that. And once you think that you're done, keep going a little bit more. That's also a sort of general rule. With this last layer, we want it really, really well adhered and down to those fibers, paper fibers. Okay. And then let it rest and dry. Another 5 or so minutes. And it'll be ready to put into the case and glue in. Case it. So I have the case that's ready to go. One thing that I wanted to share about the inside, which is technically optional, but it can be a really nice touch, which is to trim out the paste, the turn-ins equally. So right now, like I have a little less turn in on the bottom than the top. This width is a little bit wider. So I'm going to trim down to the narrowest measurement. And just use a little piece of scrap paper to get that measurement. Looks like it's this right here is the narrowest spot. Get that measurement and then transfer all the way around. And the reason that this is a nice detail to add is that if you have a thin paste down or a light colored paste down for the end sheets, you'll probably be able to see this paper as you can see through the end sheet. And if it's not even, you'll be able to see that. If it is even, you probably won't notice it. That's how good design goes, you know. And then use a ruler, your X-Acto knife to connect all of those marks and trim down. Be careful while going over the spine area because the joint does not have any board protecting it. So stop right at the edge of the board and then keep going. And then carefully lift up those areas that need to be removed. And they should peel right up. And just kind of cut a stopping point on those areas close to the board edge near the spine. This paper is a little bit fragile and tearing, but that's okay. Top. Okay. Go over it, the bone folder to smooth out any loose spots. Okay. This case is ready for the text block. Just grab it like this and put it in. Just making sure everything fits still nicely. That. And how's everybody doing? Does anybody need a break? Should we finish up this book? Cool. All right. So casing in. Woo! So excited. We need some scrap paper. And once your book, your text block is really nice and snug against the spine of the case and centered head and tail, can then carefully open up the front cover and slip a bit of scrap paper underneath the first end sheet. The reason being, we're going to glue out this end sheet and we want to protect the rest of the book. Step one is lift up the flange and glue out underneath the flange with your adhesive. And then lower the flange and glue on top of that and the rest of the paste down.
Would we use Elmer's glue for this step like we've been doing for the rest of it, or would you use PVA glue for this part?
Yeah, Elmer's glue, so it doesn't dry out too fast. This is kind of a large area, and we want to be able to adjust it. So yes, Elmer's glue. I think I left my Elmer's glue lid open and it's really thick. Should probably water that down. That's okay. Next, slip out a scrap piece of paper. And if you have any extra along the foredge, use your finger to remove any extra because that'll squeeze out and be visible on your case. Just be sure it's snug on the spine and then lift up the cover and holding the foredge with one hand, lower the cover with your other hand. If it's moved, I'll move it back in place. And then give it a light tap and flip the whole thing over so that you can see on the inside if everything's lined up nicely. I have to push mine a little bit one way. That's all right. And then smooth it out with your hand. And then bone fold it to get really nice contact with the end sheet to the board. We don't want to crank open the text block because that might pull or tear the end sheet. So leave it at the most like perpendicular, but preferably at an angle like this. To protect everything. And then you can open right up to the last page and repeat that process of gluing out the end sheet. Right. I have a little bit of water. I'm gonna just water down my glue because it's really super thick. Okay. Mix it all together. And do the same series of steps. So Pull back the Japanese flange and glue under that. Lower it and glue on top, as well as the rest of the end sheet.
So you don't actually glue the spine to the cover, it's really just the end sheets to the cover?
That is correct. Yeah, the spine is totally free and loose from the hardcover case. Great question.
Is there a specific reason like why that is done? Is it easier like to open or?
Yeah. If the spine was glued, then it would really tear from the case. And I can grab a book that's already made to show how that functions. Close the case, flip it over, and make any adjustments. Smooth it out. Okay. Now we'll let this dry under some weight and preferably with scrap paper in between the board and the end sheet. If you have wax paper, that is a great thing to add just in case there's any extra adhesive. But oh gosh, it says printing on it, probably transfer. So some semi-clean paper go in there. That, and then a couple of books, and that's probably enough. Let me grab a case binding. And here's one that's already made. And you can see when you open it that the board, the spine needs to pull away a little bit when you open to give it that freedom that it needs to open and close. Yeah. Some books, I feel like historic books, leather-bound books, for instance, they are thicker and usually rounded. And in those cases, I'm pretty sure you do adhere the leather directly onto the section spines. But leather is more flexible than this rigid spine and will allow to open and close. Nice. Let's see, any questions on any of those steps, really?
Can you use tissue paper as for the lining, or is that too like delicate, like not strong?
I've tried to use really thin rice paper and it tends to tear.
Yeah.
On it. It could be used for that very first Japanese lining if you use a stipple brush or really any kind of paintbrush to tap it in place and not rub back and forth. That would work. Yeah.
And then mine, I don't know, it's kind of hard to see, but it's curved up a little bit. Like I think I tied it too tight. Would it be worth it to like re-sew it looser, or at this point should I just like force it into place? It doesn't take much to force it into place, but I just don't know if that's like healthy.
It might be workable. So if you put your text block between boards and then jog the spine really hard, and if it's flat at that point, I would say proceed and just, apply your glue and layers, and it'll probably be flat. One thing that you can do with the end sheets is apply, I don't have much example, but along the spine of the end sheet, you can put a little bit of glue and kind of tug that in place. So if you were to open up your end sheet, yes, keep going to the other, keep going to the whole section of the end sheet. So the teal side. Yeah. So you would apply adhesive on just a couple millimeters along the paper spine side. Do you think you know where I'm? Yeah, right along there. Yeah.
Okay.
And
and you would put it on the paper. Oh, okay, I get it.
And then that would cinch it back into place.
Okay. And then I have one more. I forgot. What did we do with these strings? Did we just cut them really short?
Yeah, like a 1/4 inch long.
Okay. And then just sort of tuck it in there.
Yeah, you can kind of glue them flush with the spine. That first layer. Yeah. Nice. Nice. These steps are all in the handouts. The casing in steps are in the second handout, so you have something to refer to. Let's make sure that is in fact true. Yeah. So this handout goes over casing in. And yeah. Other questions or thoughts? Thanks. Good, good. How about we take a little break and I'll get set up for sewing in the long and length? Yeah, thumbs up.
Yay.
Yay. All right.
Laura, any update on your chicken coop?
What about the chicken coop?
Do you have any updates on it?
Oh yeah, so it's almost finished.
Oh, no way! That like took you no time at all to build it, I feel like.
I was in the garage for like 4 hours a day for 3 days. I redid some work. Like I tried to patch together different boards for the floor.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, there were like gaps and it just didn't. And some parts were overhanging off of the edge, which I realized would throw off every next step of like build the walls with a wonky floor.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like, take a step back, girl, and
I know, you just want it to be done. You're like, it's gonna be so cool, but you're like, it's not level.
Right. Exactly.
That's awesome.
Some plywood that was more uniform and less pieces.
It'll be easier to clean too. Like if you guys put, I don't know what like material put down, but like hay or something for them, it'll be easier for you to clean it out. Like the floor is even and everything too.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think I have a photo.
Yes, share it if you do. Do you know what kind of chickens you guys are gonna get yet?
I don't know. It really depends on what the farm. I found a really wonderful farm, and their eggs are delicious. I've been buying from them.
Oh, awesome.
So, do you have any experience with chickens?
I do not. I just know that we were talking about it lightly in my house, like, you know, once like everything started like going on lockdown, because my brother, like, this is not a joke, he will just eat like 6 eggs for breakfast. And we were like, economically, just having chickens would be the best, you know? But unfortunately, like after doing some like research, because my house is like a zoo, we have like 3 cats and a dog and just animals everywhere. But the dog that we have is like notorious for like killing chickens or something like that. So we decided it was for the best to not get them right now. But I'm hoping in the future it'll be something we do. But my mom also worked at like a flower and like garden shop, and they had like a petting zoo, and she used to like and there was this one chicken named Daisy who used to follow her around all the time while she was working, and so she's always wanted chickens since then. So I guess it's always something we've been chatting about. So
definitely. Oh.
And Rachel, is this your senior year? Like, is this your last semester? It is. So how does that affect like your capstone or whatever you have to do now that you're not like in school?
So, I mean, we're basically just like writing our thesis paper as if everything, like, we're just writing, like, gonna finish our thesis paper. There's gonna be some sort of like digital exhibition that, like, in place of the RIT shows. But my show, I postponed it until August 7th, hopefully. So that's something to look forward to. Hopefully I can get into the studio and actually get my work by the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
What?
That's it. That it's just so uncertain. Well,
I know. But if I can, it'll be good that I have the date. And then if I can't get my stuff, then I'll just say I can't do my show, I guess. I don't know. And then there's no graduation ceremony, so that's cool.
I'm just gonna share my screen to see the chicken coop that I'm building, if that's okay. So this is the backside with the door that opens and closes. This is the front with, it's not totally sided yet with boards, but there'll be this little opening for them to go in and out. And I used all old barn wood and found wood that we had in our garage to make it. Spent $0 so far, so that's really worried. And I still do need to build a pen with some chicken wire around it so they can be outside but not wandering into the streets and stuff. So it's almost done.
It's super neat. Very rustic.
Thank you. It's been really engaging though, because mathematically, like, I had to figure out what size I could make with the wood that I had, and I was only using a handsaw, so I wanted to make the least number of cuts as possible. So adding that into the mix, really a good flow where I was super focused. Let me grab my lamp so we can have a little more light. Okay, and we'll transition now into the long and link stitch style of case binding. So this we prepared just in the same way as the other case binding, except with punching holes into the spine, which I demonstrated last time, but I didn't open them up. And it might actually be difficult to see them, but there are the pattern of holes in the same, I don't think I have it, but laid out in the same way that I showed how to lay them out. And then I converted that template into a punching template and punched the sections to match the case. So our next step is to sew individual sections into the spine of the case one at a time. And these instructions are in a handout as well up on my courses. And there's sewing instructions that look like this, the diagram, and I'll just show how to do it. So first step is be sure that the holes of the section line up with the holes of the case. So we're gonna go like that. Next, we'll cut some thread. Gesundheit.
Not Corona.
I know. I want to just tell people I'm just having allergies. It's fine.
I know, but I also get like people that were coughing in the store today. Even though I know that a cough doesn't mean Corona, there's something about it that's still just like gets me a little shook.
Yeah. So I'm measuring the length of the section by the number of sections that I have, which is 8, and adding 1 more for knots. So, oh gosh, just right. Then we'll add wax, like usual. Where is that? Okay, and add our needle. I find that embroidery floss is a loose threads, like they're not as tightly wound as the linen thread that we're using. So when I try to do the little slip knot trick, I'll do it. But it isn't very strong because embroidery thread just isn't as tight as the linen thread. But that's all right, still usable. We'll start on the inside of the section in the second hole from the head or tail. So here that, the second one, not the kettle stitch, but the first stitch here. And we'll go from the inside of the section and then through the spine at the corresponding hole at the, furthest hole to the right in this case, and exit out the spine. Leave yourself a tail of a few inches. Make a knot, and then go from the outside to the inside of the next hole. So we're making a long stitch. That's where the name comes from, that it's long instead of linking, which is up and down, vertical. And then when you get to the inside of the case, you'll go into the next hole of the section. It's gonna be a little tricky. Get through all of the pages. Wait, open up that hole a little bit. And pull it through. On the spine, we can see a long stitch right there. And then we'll go from the inside of the section out to the next hole of the spine. and in. All right, and then we're at the last hole, head or tail. And we will exit from the outside of the case. Pull everything cinched up a little bit. And at this point, we will go up to the very next hole on the spine, right there. So directly up, so that we can add our second section. So open up the case and add your next section. Make sure it's flipped in the right direction. Directly into that hole there. And pull nice and tight. And go from the inside to the outside. And this part can be a little tricky. You're gonna use the same hole that you went in and out previously. So these holes will all have 2 threads running parallel. So you just have to kind of sneak the needle down and into that hole, come out along the spine. And as you'll notice, you already have a thread there, and you'll have another thread running next to it. Come into the inside and into the section. And then out. And do that same thing with the next pair. Oops, make sure you're not getting your thread caught. This length of thread is probably too long to do comfortably. Probably should have done a shorter length and then added thread, but I trimmed it. So just keep going. And then from the outside to the inside. At our last station, you'll choose along the series of holes at the head or tail, you'll choose the second hole up so that then you can go to the first hole and into the first section and tie a knot there. So just keep out the second hole from the bottom, then going into the first and back into the first section. Here, where you should see your tail that you left. And at this point, we should tighten up any loose threads because we're about to make a knot. You can't go back to do that. And now we'll tie a square knot with the end of the thread, the short end and the long end that we're working with, and tie the knot over the first hole. So left over right, right over left. Tie down. And next, we'll exit the first section. And we won't go to the outside of the case. We'll just sneak the needle to the inside of the case. And at this point, we'll add our third section. We're only on the inside, because if we were to go to the outside, we'd have to go to the outside of the case and come back in, and there'd be an extra loop. So with this situation, we're doing a sort of secret inside loop directly into the third section. And at this point, I might flip the camera so you can see it sewn from the other way. Inside. Let's see. Is that all visible? Cool. Okay. So the next hole. And now we'll enter the second hole up with the pairs of holes. So number 2 looks like that. Out. And then back in the hole next to it. Be sure to get it into the section, the right spot. Keeps getting found up. We'll do our in and out sewing once more. Out and in. And then we'll exit out the third hole on the spine, the case of the spine here. Cinch everything up nice and tight, and then we'll do a link stitch at the last hole, at the kettle stitch. Is that visible with the lighting?
It's a little dark, but
Okay. Let me
I think we kind of get it. I don't know if that's just me.
Okay. I'll try my best to not make a shadow with it. So you slip the needle underneath the loop that's already there to make a link. Hence the long and link. And then re-enter the same hole we just came out of.
Can you bring? Yeah.
Oh, was it out of the frame? Oh gosh.
It was, but you know, it's okay.
Okay. So I just went under that loop and now going back into the same hole. Like that. And we'll add our fourth section at the same time. And go in and out, same thing. This time sharing the second hole with the section beneath. So we'll have two threads coming out this hole as well. In. And out. This time exiting the third hole on the spine and doing another link stitch. So going underneath the stitch from the inside to the outside. Pulling it tight. And re-enter that same hole. And here you would add your fifth section and continue going in and out to the end and link and add section after section, always pairing the long stitches with two sections until you get to the very last station and you would link and re-enter the last hole and then just tie a double square knot on the inside of the section. Inside of the section. Nice and tidy. Let me just flip this around. Those, do you feel like you could imagine how it would finish off?
Yeah.
Nice. It's kind of, it's a time consuming sewing, just lining up the whole of the section with the whole of the case. But it's really just in and out, you know, all along the spine. Any questions on those steps? Cool. Cool. So that would be, I finished that book. And yeah, those are all of the demonstrations that I have for this evening. Just to go over our timeline, next class, Thursday, will be a work session, an opportunity to ask questions if you try out these techniques. Or if new folks join us, then I'll probably redo some demonstrations. And yeah, these we'll have 2 books due for April 16th, which is next Thursday, which gives folks enough time to make one and then make another of the same or try a new structure. I'm happy to do one-on-one help and advice if there's a structure that you find online or anywhere that you want to try. We can go over that.
I just had a quick question about like the final project. Do you have like any idea what that's going to be like yet? Just so I can start like brainstorming ideas, gathering materials, that sort of thing.
Yeah. The outline of the final project should be under the overview on my courses.
Oh, cool. I must have missed it.
Just gonna double check that. So, overview, there is the syllabus and the new dates. And then it goes over each of the projects. So
Okay, cool.
book structure project, which is what we're on, and then final project, which I'll just say is very open-ended. And thinking about, really, as we were talking about earlier, what do we do with art now? The question is, why books now? Like, what function can books have in our current moment? Whether that's a journal for yourself or for someone that you care about, or a book with content, something that's meaningful to you right now. And it could be, as I was saying, blank or something with content or book repair, really anything related to the structure of the book. But could also, I'm pretty sure I included, could be a non-physical book project, like a paper, research paper, or some sort of video project, maybe interviewing someone in the field of books or libraries, or something that you're interested in.
Cool.
Any other questions or comments?
No.
Nice. At this point, we could wrap up and dismiss for the evening. That's cool with everybody?
Yeah.
All right. I will be posting this video as well on YouTube, which I'll link in my courses if you'd like to refer to it.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. So nice to see you.
See you too, Laura. Bye.
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 Yeah, bye.
Have a good night.
You too.